are Capventis. We help our clients and their customers win in today's experience economy, which is demanding, sophisticated, disruptive, and constantly changing. To win, we put our finger on our customer's pulse and derive usable insight to help drive improvements throughout their business. Here, value is the driver and data is the ingredient. Then technology brings them together. We work with the best technologies in the world today so you get real value and usable information from your data. Capventis has the team to help you win.
Hello and welcome to this year's Capventis Qlik Analytics Tour. My name is Brian O'Flynn and I'm a director with Capventis. I sincerely hope you're keeping all well after another tough year. Normally, as you know, we get together in some nice venue or our hotel to celebrate all things Qlik. And unfortunately, for the second year in a row, we're having to run the event remotely. Hopefully next year we'll actually get together to meet again in person. We've been a Qlik Elite partner for 14 years. And even after all that time, we're still excited about Qlik. We're excited about Qlik now as we were when we originally signed up back in 2007. And the reason we're so excited about Qlik is that the company continues to innovate, not just in the areas of data visualization, but also in all areas of data utilization, from acquisition to insight to action. So today, to share with you the latest from Qlik, we have a great lineup. First up, we have a keynote from my colleague, Donal McKegney, around driving action from data analytics in a cloud-oriented world. Following Donal, next up, we have Stephen Givney. He's going to do a demo showing Qlik Sense SaaS environments. Following Stephen, we have a really interesting piece from Paul Daly and Nicola Graham of Smart Dublin, talking about their journey to transform and unlock data and transform citizen services. Before the break then, we have a really interesting piece where John Glenn and Mike Hawkes of Capventis are in discussion with Mark Lockwood, an intelligence analysis historian, around how organizations are leveraging O and X data to drive value from insight. We'll then take a short break, and following the break, then we have Lee Kennedy from Qlik, who will be introduced us to doing a workshop around the Qlik Sense Enterprise. So just a bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions or queries during the session today, please feel free to use the chat, or if you prefer, you can email us on marketing@capventis.com. And we'll respond to your queries as soon as possible. So that's it for me. It's time to get started. So I'm now going to hand you over to Donal, and he's going to talk about driving action from data analytics in a cloud-oriented world. Over to you, Donal.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning and welcome to the Cloud Data and Analytics Tour. My name is Donal McKegney and I head up the data analytics team at Capventis. Today, I'm going to talk to you about driving action from data analytics in a cloud-oriented world. First, let's start by looking back and reflecting on what has happened in the world and how things have changed. For years, there were indications that it might happen. Our world has been getting more interconnected and customer expectations are continuing to rise. In fact, for lots of years in a row, major global organizations predicted that this year would be the year. They would pour millions into convincing others that they needed to be ready. It's amazing how, despite all the talk and information, few organizations were actually ready when it happened. I'm sure you've already guessed what I'm talking about. The biggest, most long-lasting change of 2020, digital transformation. As the pandemic set in, organizations rose to the challenge. The disruption forced upon all of us became a catalyst for wider organizational changes. Digital transformation projects, which normally would have taken years to execute, were completed in weeks. Everyone suddenly had online ordering and delivered services remotely. Small companies, which previously would have been too small to have a robust digital presence, pivoted in a matter of days. Many organizations were forced to reimagine their core services. From a personal perspective, when we were locked down, my wife found a small company in Galway called Green Earth Organics that delivers beautiful in-season organic vegetables right to your door. She wouldn't have thought of this, and they wouldn't have considered providing this service before the pandemic. Now she gets fresh fish from the Atlantic Ocean, meat from Tipperary, and even pot plants for the garden, all delivered in boxes. There's a company called Zumba, whose entire business was based on a network of independent instructors delivering in-person fitness classes that went from a standing start to global online community in a matter of weeks. Why was this all possible? The cloud. The pandemic created conditions where people were open to radically new ways of working, but the ability to execute on these changes were only possible because of the agility and scale that cloud provided. Those small companies didn't need to set up their new online environment, they just needed to sign up. Zumba didn't need to procure new hardware, build from the bottom up, and then roll out slowly to ensure scalability. They just had to integrate existing cloud services and skin a branded user interface. While the initial phases of the pandemic forced change and drove cloud adoption, the benefit of cloud and SaaS will continue to be a competitive advantage for organizations who embrace it, for three main reasons. First of all, ease of access, providing your entire workforce with reliable, secure access to what they need, regardless of where they are, be that working from home or sometime soon working in the office, never needing to worry about if your systems are running and accessible because they're always available in the cloud. Rapid adoption. As innovations and new capabilities come out, all your teams get to access them right away and without your IT organization needing to lift a finger to upgrade. There's no longer a need to wait to improve usability, start using a new capability, or streamline a workflow. Agility and TCO. As conditions change, you too can change. If usage happens to spike, you're covered. If a new use case is developed, you can just start. And there's no need for people monitoring, upgrading, optimizing. All of that is part of the service. Your total cost of ownership is reduced. Analytics is now benefiting from the power of cloud as organizations strive to maximize the competitive advantages possible from data and analytics. MedAir is an example of a Qlik partnership that is based on common goals and the use of data and analytics in the cloud. MedAir leverages Qlik to mobilize their humanitarian operations, monitor health and outcomes, and serves the entire NGO sector as a beacon of how data can truly drive the way that humanitarian aid is delivered. MedAir uses Qlik to drive their operations. They use Qlik across the organization to support their work in Bangladesh, Madagascar, Haiti, Nepal, South Sudan, Jordan, and Lebanon. Fully SaaS enabled, MedAir is using Qlik Cloud to enable analysts and executives in the headquarters in Lausanne in Switzerland to have access to all data and measurements at aggregated level from field operations and detailed financial management metrics, knowing every day how much MedAir can respond if disaster strikes. MedAir has used Qlik to monitor and measure all COVID-19 programming in all the countries they serve. They have used Qlik to calculate the response to the earthquake in Nepal and the Ebola crisis in West Africa. Field analysts and healthcare professionals have dashboards for programming to measure and monitor priorities for delivering support. This is a best-in-class example of how data can save lives and how businesses can be more agile with a lower cost of ownership by using cloud. You can help with important relief work by scanning the QR code or going to the address on this slide. Qlik will match your donations. We can make it easier and more efficient with cloud, but we must not forget the ultimate objective. The life of an organization is made up of business moments. Some big, some small, They occur at variable intervals and they are rarely predictable. However, in nearly all cases, they require some kind of action, a shift in direction in order to take advantage of an opportunity or to mitigate a risk. The problem is these moments can be easily missed, and when they are, they can translate into missed opportunity as well. What if you're a food delivery service or a restaurant and you miss warning signs of dissatisfaction about food quality because your systems are not capturing derivative data from social media? What if you're a bank and a sudden large withdrawal from a key customer doesn't trigger any alerts in your systems? What if you're a manufacturer and your systems fail to record anomalies in purchasing trends from a large retail account, leading to supply issues? What if you're an emergency services dispatcher and you're unable to reposition ambulances and fire trucks to optimize coverage and response times? To seize these business moments, organizations need to arm their people with up-to-date, real-time insights and compel action. Ultimately, the emergence of these new use cases represent a shift in the way we do analytics. I suspect many of you are familiar with the maturity model that represents the type of analytics we perform. The shift from descriptive to diagnostic to predictive and on to prescriptive analytics. It's good, although we've always found the notion of the shift from one to another based on a combination of value and difficulty might be less helpful than the idea of analytic maturity encompassing all forms of analytics across multiple use cases. Prescriptive analytics, for example, is only tagged with the question, how can we make it happen, rather than actually making it happen. Qlik favors an alternate view where it focuses on the way we do analytics and the type of data. This is where we see active intelligence providing true value. Not replacing what went before, but embracing it, capturing the ability to apply multiple analytic practices to increasingly real-time data that is governed, trusted, and encompasses business logic. Drives more business value than just asking what we should do. To put that in context, the promise of active intelligence is to tap the pulse of your business before, during, and after you build a dashboard, and then to action it. Little over a decade ago in the financial crisis, distressed organizations struggled to find needles in haystacks, insights in their data. In response, Qlik was the enabler of data and analytic architectures moving from being passive to being reactive. Now we want to be your partner, enabling your move from reactive to augmented to active intelligence. Regardless of your organization's current level of maturity, we know Qlik can be an essential catalyst in your digital transformation journey. Why does Qlik know that? Because they asked. The vision of active intelligence is unique in the market, and while others may try to imitate it in words only, Qlik is delivering it in its products today. That is the vision: to enable active intelligence and close the gaps that result in missed business moments. Ultimately, there are two parts to this. First, we are delivering the component parts that enable us to build a complete end-to-end analytics data pipeline. The unique combination of Qlik's data integration, analytics, and services offerings provide that foundation. We are leveraging it to close the gaps that prevent our customers from getting true value from data, the gap between relevant and actionable data and actionable insights, and finally, insights and business value. We do this by freeing data from silos, making it accessible to all types of users so they can understand it and uncover new insights. Secondly, by building this pipeline of data and analytics, we can start to exploit it by innovating along the supply chain to address new use cases and deliver new solutions that bring active intelligence to life through the real-time delivery of data and insights that don't just inform, but ultimately drive collaboration and trigger action. You, our customers and partners, consistently tell us that you are looking for more than what a tool or a point solution can deliver. So when Qlik asked most of our successful customers, this is what they said and why Qlik was the right choice for them. First, it's critical to look holistically at what Qlik offers. This is more than visualizations, more than dashboards, and more than data replication and movement. Qlik is a facilitator of data-driven transformation. You see Qlik deployed from across all use cases as customers get up and running quickly and simply in Qlik Cloud as individuals and teams, right up to the most demanding, complex enterprise environments characterized by large amounts of data from many different data sources that need to be carefully managed and governed. Qlik excels across these use cases, handling even the most complex use cases simply. Qlik is recognized by analysts in the industry for this. Qlik's data integration platform is designed with a scale and high performance approach to data replication, which enables real-time data delivery. This, coupled with the change data capture, automation, and catalog, means that Qlik can support customers at a scale others can only imagine. Qlik's patented associative technology unquestionably leads to more insights than any other platform. It doesn't use a SQL approach that forces users to drill down a specific predefined path, leaving data behind at each step. Qlik users find as much value in what's not associated as what is. Furthermore, it's this foundation that has meant that Qlik has been able to rapidly innovate and now lead with the augmented analytics offerings. Search is just a feature, but the Insight Advisor leverages AI, the cognitive engine, and machine learning to provide a digital assistant across the data supply chain. This enables more users to engage through conversational analytics, drive collaboration across the analytics lifecycle, and break down the industry's most significant barrier to value, the data literacy of users. So couple this with the ability to support all analytics use cases and then embed analytics anywhere they're needed most will enable organizations to provide analytics to everyone and adopt a true data-driven culture. Finally, only Qlik provides an end-to-end governance framework that enables IT to collaborate with the business to make governed, approved data sets easily available through the enterprise. When you take this framework and apply it to an open platform with a unique hybrid cloud deployment options, Qlik stands alone as the choice for customers looking to avoid data lock-in, address local governance needs, and reduce costs. In summary, our customers tell us complexity, self-service, governance, scalability, and cost predictability are key needs. The result is lower cost of ownership and more business value. So, to bring to life what we've been discussing, Stephen is going to join us and show you a demo. You'll see how you too can free it, find it, understand it, and action it all in Qlik Cloud. In other words, Stephen is going to show us active intelligence.
Thanks, Donal, and hi everyone. Today I'm going to show you a quick demo of how easy it is to create apps and visualizations whilst exploring insights using Qlik's associative engine. I'm also going to show you how Qlik's capabilities in monitoring data in real time can be leveraged in order for you to take action when data changes. Okay, so let me just change gears here and share my screen. So I'm going to start in the when data changes. Okay, so let me just change gears here and share my screen. So I'm going to start in the Cloud Hub in my personal space. Again, this is a great area for storing personal content and data that you are working with. So if we move on to our chart section, again, these are charts that I have made a decision to add to my Cloud Hub. And again, this is great for any charts that you are frequently accessing or have a high level of importance. And again, it removes the need for actually having to go into the application, and you can monitor these charts very accessibly. If we then go to our apps, and we can see some of the applications that I'm currently working on, and then we go to our data, we can see what data files we actually have access to. Okay, so thanks to Qlik's catalog capabilities, what we can now do before actually creating an application is we can go and investigate the data set that we want to work on before creating the application. So if we look at our sales data and we open this up, we can see there are some key properties in terms of total rows, fields, source, size, and everything else. What you'll also notice is you can profile the data, okay? And this is great if you are looking to get context around the content that actually exists within this data file. So we can see here, again, a brief snapshot. And if you want to get some context in terms of the actual values, we can see the data sample. Okay, if you're working with particularly sensitive data, you can go and add a property, okay? So once the property is added, all users will be aware of this. Okay, so with this in mind, again, I'm happy to essentially create an application from our sales data set. So I'm just going to create app from data. And because this is data specific to a global retail organization, I'm going to call it Retail Apparel. And I'm going to create. So what's happening now is the data is being loaded into the application, and again, the file is being compressed and it's being indexed so that it's Qlik ready. Okay, so you can see now that you essentially have two options. You can go to Sheet and start to build out your charts and visualizations, or you can go to Insights. And so why you would go to Insights is if you're interested in seeing what Qlik might recommend in terms of the data that you have provided. Okay, so if we select Generate Insights, Qlik is leveraging its inbuilt data literacy alongside the associative engine to generate charts and visualizations based on the data that you've provided. So you can see, again, there's a number of KPIs around cost of sales in terms of order IDs. We can also see some geomaps and things like that. Okay. Now, before I actually go and kind of build out my dashboard, the one thing I would like to do is essentially add more data to this application. So again, in my mind, the more data you have, the better. Luckily, today we do have more data to add. So where you want to go is you want to go to the data manager to perform this. Okay, so we can see our sales data here. And again, if we want to add data, simply click on the plus sign. And you can take one of two approaches here. So if you want to connect directly to a data source, you can see a number of different connectors here. And you can see the likes of Snowflake, SAP, REST connectors, again, especially useful for anyone looking to connect APIs, and also a number of social media connectors. Okay, now for the purpose of today, I'm going to go into my data files and I'm going to specifically look at more sales and order data. And what you'll notice here is essentially this data file has a number of different tables. And again, the more data for me, the better. So I'm just going to select everything. And once I hit next, it's doing the exact same thing again. It's loading this data, bringing it into the application. And essentially it's compressing and indexing and getting it ready so that we can now work with this data too, okay? And a good way to kind of, I suppose, describe the fundamentals of how this works is if we select sales data, okay, we can actually see different associations or relationships that exist across each data set. So you can see between sales data and products, there's a strong association between these two data files. Whereas if you were to compare to employees it's seeing no association across these two data sets. And again, you can see also in terms of categories, territory, suppliers, and office, again, it falls somewhere in the middle of the two. Okay, so it uses this fundamental logic to go off and create the data model for you. So if we hit preview all, okay, you can see how it has created the data model for you. And again, I'm using this term associations. Again, an association is very similar to a join in terms of data modeling. However, the primary difference is an association leaves no piece of data behind. So if we're happy with the data model, which we are, I'm going to apply all. And we're going to load the data. So this now brings us back to our insights. And so again, we're in a position where if we hit generate insights, we have the added value of the additional data that we have loaded into the application. However, I do want to take it one step further. And I want to actually just add some additional features to the logical model. And again, the logical model is very powerful in that it allows you to create particular rules and behaviors that might be specific to your company or industry or team or whatever it might be. So in the context of today, you can see that I've created 2 calendars, okay? And I'm going to also create a behavior, okay? So the main reason why I want to create a behavior is, again, I particularly have an interest in being able to see how my company is performing quarter on quarter. So during any one visualization, I would like to see, I suppose, the current quarter and being versus the previous quarter. Okay, so I'm going to go with order details, order calendar, and again, I'm going to go year, quarter, current, last. Again, we could do the same thing on a month-by-month basis, but again, I'm going to stick with quarter for now. So if we create this and go back into our insights, again, now I am happy in terms of we have our additional data and we also have our behavior that we created in the logical model to really give Qlik a really good steer in terms of the insights we are interested in. So again, same process here. It's using its inbuilt data literacy alongside the associative engine to generate the following visualizations. And you can see straight away in the top left chart here. So it's registering with Qlik that we are interested in this side-by-side comparison in terms of current and last quarter, which is great. Again, if you do have sort of a specific focus or there are some areas that you kind of want to narrow in on, you can do that. There's no issue at all. So if we look at the fields that on the left-hand side of the screen here, so let's just say we want to select sales, we want to select quantity, and we also want to select, let's say, discount and country. Qlik is going to generate visualizations and charts specific to this context. And you can see sales, quantity, discount, country. And now I think I'm ready to really sort of have a look at what charts we actually want to bring into our dashboard here. Okay, so we can see a number of scatter plots, again, a number of bar charts. And this is really interesting now. So, and again, I didn't mention earlier, but Qlik actually has inbuilt geo-analytic features. And this is why it's able to suggest and recommend geomaps that, again, what we're looking at here is sales by country in the form of a geomap. So I'm actually going to add this to my sheet. Okay. And you can also see that they're suggesting Pareto analysis charts. Again, this is something that I could see myself working with in a live environment. So I'm going to add this to my dashboard as well. Okay. And what you'll also notice in terms of our last 2 suggestions here is these charts look a little bit different in comparison to the other charts that have been generated. Again, that's intentional. So if we actually just open this up, we'll see that Qlik actually only just created a chart for us and that again, we might be interested. It's actually gone off and developed a whole dashboard based on the fields that we have actually suggested. And again, it's probably most obvious in the table in the bottom left corner here, in terms of our country, our sales, our quantity, and discount. What you'll kind of notice as well is there's an overall theme in terms of, again, targets, whether you missed targets, whether you met targets, again, specific targets that we have in place to try and benchmark against and things like that. And the last thing I'm going to actually just put some focus on as well is the analysis period that we set up in the logical model. Again, it's great to see that it's actually recognizing this and taking this into consideration as well when going off and essentially developing dashboards for ourselves in an automated fashion. So what I'm going to do is, I actually only had really intention of creating one dashboard today, but again, this is pretty good, and I wouldn't mind actually bringing this into the application. So I'm going to add this to our sheet, okay? And I'll go back into our insights. And what I'm just going to quickly do here is just clear our results, okay? So I'm conscious. So again, we have an additional dashboard actually ready to go now. We have 2 charts, and again, there is maybe one or 2 charts I might like to also bring into this application. And a great way to sort of navigate your way to visualizations, insights, is purely through natural language. So if we had a specific question in mind, such as, I would like to say, see, cost of goods, and discount by, let's say, country. So again, using the same inbuilt data literacy and the associative engine, and it's essentially going off and creating charts for us specific to the query we had. Okay, so you can see the scatter plot here. We also it's been provided with an insight in terms of Qlik is informing us that there's the total cost of good is 114k and the total discount is 13.2. Okay, great, it's interesting. And also, if we just scroll down, we can see some additional charts. And actually, to be honest, I really do like the fact that they've suggested k-mean analysis. This, again, is something that I could genuinely see myself working with in my environment. So what I might like to do is I'm actually going to add this to my dashboard as well. And I might just even jump in to see how our dashboard is now looking. Okay. So we're almost there. Again, we also have our dashboard here to rely on as well. So that's great. So that is in focus too. But I'm also conscious that so every chart that I've sort of gone with today, it's essentially been a recommendation from Qlik. Again, I'd like to maybe show you how you can create a chart from scratch as well. And also a very quick and easy process. So for example, if we wanted to specifically look at something like sales, we were to just drag and drop it onto our sheet, we can see this straight away that Qlik has identified this as being best represented as a single KPI, which makes sense because it's the total sales figure, which makes sense. And also, if we were to say introduce something like category name, we'll probably see this then update. And you can see that, again, Qlik is suggesting a bar chart. So this goes back to the inbuilt data literacy that Qlik has embedded in the associative engine. So again, it's really powerful. But at the same time, if you do want to customize or configure any of these charts, you can simply just turn off the chart selection. Okay, so example for me, I would probably like to see this chart sort of in descending order. So if we just sort like that, that straight away fixes that. And then if we then go into our appearance, I wouldn't mind just sort of adding a layer of complexity in terms of some additional coloring. So rather than just going with one single color, what we might do is we might color by measure. Okay, so the key measure we have in place here is sales, which is great. That's what I would like to continue with. And also I might just add a gradient here as well. Okay, so we're now in pretty good shape in terms of both dashboards here. So again, I would actually like to start navigating this application and see if we can kind of get some insights in terms of the data we're working with here today. So if we were to select, let's say, men's footwear, sportwear, and women's wear, and we were to take a slightly more, a more focus on, let's say, some of our top performing countries such as Germany, United Kingdom, and France. Okay, we can see that everything updates accordingly. And again, we're looking at everything now from the context specifically of those selections. And the great thing is this actually carries over to any other dashboards you might have. So this context remains. Okay, so if we do just keep in mind exactly what we're looking at here, so we can see in terms of our 8 categories, we have selected men's footwear, sportswear, and women's wear. And then in terms of our 21 countries, we've selected 3, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. And I do just want to touch on this for a second because this is actually quite important. So this really is showing us a lot more than just categories are selected and categories that aren't selected. In fact, if we look at the likes of Argentina, Austria, Belgium, Brazil, Canada, those that aren't in green, what this is essentially saying to us here is because it's appearing in this light grey color, what this is saying is that in terms of these countries that are below United Kingdom, so Argentina, Austria, Belgium, Brazil, and so on, they do in fact sell products within these category names as per country. However, if you do scroll down, if you notice Norway is in a dark grey color, what this is essentially saying to us here is that Norway does not sell any products within the category names that we have selected. Okay, so again, we didn't specifically go looking for this insight, but you can see how powerful, again, the green, white, and grey concept can allow for. So really, you know, what Qlik allows you to do is it allows you to leverage the full scope of your data at any one point in time through these fundamentals and through the associative engine. Again, this is really powerful and really it's again a really good way to essentially get insights that you wouldn't otherwise see in other tools. Okay, so what I might do, so again, this is great again for sort of getting insights that again are sort of just appearing as you navigate throughout the application. If you do have a more specific focus, okay, you can always use Qlik's Smart Search, okay? And this is really powerful. So if you want to specifically look at, okay, so how sportwear is performing across, you know, France and Germany, you can literally just go sportwear, France, Germany. And you can actually see that the first suggestion is kind of hitting the nail on the head here. So in terms of country, France and Germany, that's exactly what I'm looking for. And then in terms of category name, sportswear, great. Okay, so again, straight away, I have this kind of pie in the sky idea that I want to get specific insights into how sportwear is performing in Germany and France. And straight away, we have gotten that insight. And even better, the context is held as we go across to our initial dashboard too. So that's really powerful, okay? So in terms of navigating Qlik Sense SaaS within the cloud, we really have touched on sort of the key fundamentals. The one thing I would say, if there is a particular chart or visualization that you are very interested in, or you could see yourself using on a frequent basis, what I would recommend doing is essentially adding it to your hub, okay? So we can monitor this in our hub. And what I'll do is I'll quickly go out into the hub. And if we just go to our charts. Okay, so we can see again, it's now sitting with all of our kind of high value and easily accessible charts that we do want to again frequently monitor and keep up to date with. Okay, So again, just for context, so we're no longer in a specific application. We're back in the hub, and in terms of being able to leverage Insight Advisor, again, you can actually use Insight Advisor across all the applications. So what I mean by this, if we go into Ask Insight Advisor, we're no longer purely focused on one specific application, but we basically have the scope to get insights on any application that we have. Now, I'm going to give it a little bit of steer here. So I'm going to see our apps. So again, these are all the apps that we have to work with. Again, we've been looking at retail apparel sales data. And again, we got some good insights there. But now I want to change gears and look at office supply sales data. Okay, and again, just using natural language, what you can do is, if we're interested in maybe just start something simple. So if we go, what is total sales? Okay, so we can see the total sales is 2.08 million. And then what you might also want to get a bit of insight into is maybe what is the margin? So if we say, well, what about margin? Okay, and you can see that that's just coming just under 270K. But what is kind of interesting here is you can also see that there's a suggested analysis. Okay, so there's actually 8 other options in terms of margin that Qlik has essentially identified. So again, if you are interested in having a quick look at it, you can click on it, and you can see all the different kind of angles Qlik has identified in terms of how you can kind of analyze margin. Okay, so for example, I do like the concept of maybe looking at margin by city. So if we were to select this, we can see that Qlik has generated a horizontal bar chart specifically designed to margin by city. Okay, and again, this kind of has piqued my interest a little bit. So what I would actually like to do is I would actually like to explore this a little bit further. So again, nice convenient button here to just explore further. Okay, and now this brings us back to our insights page, and you can see that we now have a number of additional charts and visualizations specific to margin. You can see geomaps, bar charts, and just a few others as well. Okay. But again, what I'm actually more interested in is going to the sheet or dashboard where this margin data derives. So I'm going to go on to this now. Okay, so this is a good opportunity to demonstrate the alerting features in QlikSense SaaS. So essentially, if we see our margin and we want to be notified when the margin changes by a certain amount, okay, we can essentially go and create an alert. Okay, so I want to create a new alert. We'll call it, let's just say, margin monitoring. Okay, and we want to add a measure. Again, actually, we'll go margin percentage. We will add some additional measures too. So let's go cost, and let's also say sales. And if we do want to take a slightly more narrow focus, so in terms of refining our data, I'd like us to specifically look at the subcategory. So again, I'm not interested in the overall general categories, but specifically the subcategory, and again, the change in margin. So if we go next, again, when we're in the conditions, we're really just setting the conditions in terms of when we are notified. So for example, when the margin percentage is greater than, let's say, current set, and in terms of aggregation, we will go standard deviation. And once it's greater than 1, I want to be notified. You can see and we can see a quick preview of the alert. And then we're essentially there. So the last step really is to identify when we are to be alerted. So I'm happy to be alerted when the data is refreshed. That's perfect. We can also choose who receives the alert. So if we do want to share this with other users, can. Again, if we want to share it with Donald, we can see that it is an option. I won't include Donald for today, but again, the option is there. So once you're ready, you can create the alert. And then what I'll do is I'll go back into our hub, And I'm going to manually reload this application. Okay, so once the reload takes place, I'm going to change gears, and I'm actually going to bring us on to Qlik Mobile. So again, give me 1 second, and I'll switch us on to our mobile view. So as you can see, we are now in Qlik Cloud Mobile. Okay, and if we do investigate our notifications, we can see that the trigger has been alerted, so the threshold was met in terms of the standard deviation that was set. So we do want to go in and investigate this. We can. Okay, so we can see all the key details around the subcategories. If we do want to investigate this a little bit further, we can, and we go into view this in app. So we want to go to our exec summary. Okay, so you can see that sales and margin and even the number of orders have increased. Again, we can see that the margin by subcategory and sales rep is clear. Again, we can see the customer profit analysis relevant to the updates, and we can also see sales by rep. Okay, and again, this is really just to give you a quick flavor of what this would look from a mobile perspective. However, a really nice feature within this is if you do actually want to download the application, this gives you the opportunity to be able to access your data offline, again, which is a big advantage to a lot of people. So again, that's a really kind of valuable feature within the Qlik Cloud mobile experience. Yeah, so thanks guys. This concludes today's demo. Again, as a quick recap, again, we saw how quick and easy it was to load and combine multiple data sources and get really rich visualizations and insights while being able to search across the full spectrum of our data. And then we're also seeing capabilities such as chart monitoring and data alerting in terms of being able to have instant access to our data and notifications.
Thanks, Stephen. As you just saw, we're increasing the analytic value to the organization. Starting with sources on the left-hand side of this slide, you see not only the on-premise data sources, that data integration has provided a path for our customers to move data into the cloud or into modern technologies, but also from cloud to cloud in a multi-cloud and hybrid cloud environment. And being able to take that raw data and move it to the next phase, in which we can then add more value. We're creating new data on top of this raw data that is really driving the next step of the analytic journey towards increasing the business value. Then being able to characterize and describe that data using a catalog that end users solve problems with. In getting access to the data, whether it be in the data set format, being able to access it through natural language, being able to actually describe it through the notion of a business glossary enabled in the technology. Picture, by including it in insights in a traditional analytics application, but expanding that to alerting and expanding that to insights in the hub, expanding that to be able to do sharing and collaboration. We like to call this the analytic data pipeline, which is bigger than the data pipeline, which is about driving data into a target. It's really about managing that data throughout the entire life cycle, from source to insight to action. And as such, we're actually going to harden this notion of an analytics data pipeline on the system so that you can actually create them, orchestrate them, manage them, and consume them on behalf of business problems that you're going to solve. There are many organizations who are embracing analytics data pipelines to achieve the state of active intelligence. Vancouver International Airport, the top-rated airport in North America for the last 10 years, is accelerating business value through data. The amount of time that passengers and bags need to move between flights, known as the minimum connection time, is a key indicator of efficiency of a major hub airport. Using Qlik data integration and analytics apps across the organization, Vancouver International Airport has been able to seamlessly merge multiple data sets to better track the performance of key strategic connection processes. Insights gained through the Qlik dashboards have enabled the airport to focus its capital project and operational planning efforts to help materially reduce its minimum connection time. The new data hub ecosystem has enabled the airport to cut the time to run the metric from 33 hours to 40 seconds. Simply put, to drive action in a cloud world, you need an analytics data pipeline so you can find those business moments which compel action to drive business value. Only Qlik's vision of active intelligence can achieve this because it is supported by the unique integrated cloud native capabilities. Next, you can hear from one of our customers, Nicola and Paul from Smart Dublin and Libraries Ireland. They're going to share their story of how they began their analytics journey in Qlik's cloud.
Dublin City Council is one of 32 local authorities in Ireland. The Smart Dublin initiative was launched in March 2015, and its aim was to try and promote innovation and provide better services for the City of Dublin. As a local authority, we generate huge amounts of data every day. We have a lot of legacy systems because we're quite a established organisation. So it means that data isn't always connected. It's not always available in similar formats. It's not integratable. And there's a bit of work required, I suppose, from departments to try and get it up to that level so that it can be used in an effective way. One of the talks that I was at was with Capventis, highlighting how they changed and reformed a police department using Qlik. And I thought it was really, really interesting. I thought the application behind it was quite user-friendly. And there'd been a lot of conversations happening within the organisation about dashboards and, a easier way to explain data to senior management teams and things like that. So when I met Paul, we were having a conversation about open data and was there data belonging to the libraries that we could publish and make available on the open data platform. So as that conversation went on, and after having the conversation with Capventis, it seemed like they were a very good fit. By exploring the library data using the platform, I felt that we'd have some excellent results.
The library management system, it's a large network of 30 different library authorities, and effectively we've got a national library catalogue. So as you can imagine, we've got a lot of data. And as the consortia have developed, we've increased the number of integrated systems with that central catalogue. So we have, for instance, kiosks, open library systems, managed Wi-Fi. So each are producing data. So, and because we're reporting to the other local authorities, the local government management agency, we have to provide stats over the quarterly or annual or monthly basis. So we had a number of different interfaces. So the advantage of looking at these kind of data analysis interfaces was it was worthwhile for us because we wanted to see all the data in one place and automate it as much as we can up to the minute. The main conversation that we started up was about the movement of books. So obviously, because we have an integrated system, we also have an integrated reserve system, so that when members of the public, look for a book, that book could potentially come from anywhere in the country. So because of that situation, we had to look at a way that we could visualize the movement of the books in order to, think about things about resourcing or the carbon footprint or getting value for money out of our budgets. We're using a library management system called Sierra, connected to Qlik. If you have a product that helps you singularly connect all the different items and gives you an overview, a pilot overview or a panoptic eye over the different volumes, levels of data, and also the different systems that are all connected, you're able to respond to questions and decisions more rapidly than you would otherwise.
From a public perspective, they know in advance how long it's going to take. They don't have to wait as long for it. I think that's one advantage for the public. I think another one, when we talked about the movement of books around the city and our carbon footprint, if we could measure that in terms of mileage and costs, we'd have a better perspective on what kind of carbon footprint we're creating, but then also how can we address that. And I think climate change is quite topical at the moment. It's on every local authority has a climate action plan, and if you can build a baseline, as I said previously, I suppose that really helps to make better decisions about how we go forward in the future. In terms of other departments, the fact that the dashboard is so flexible, it allows you to present data to your senior management team in an easy and digestible way. Even if you wanted to go and publish some of the data and the dashboards and make them available openly for the public to see, again, it's another way it makes the data more accessible. Working with raw data, not everybody understands how to do that, or the tools that you need to be able to create visualizations. So if you can give an overview in an easy to read format, I think it helps people to understand what's happening within local authorities. And I think it helps build trust as well. The more data that you can publish, the more things that you can make open and available. People begin to rely on that information and feel like that they can trust that the information that they're getting is true information. The dashboard allows you to ask different questions that you might not have thought of asking beforehand. So if you see a trend happening in a particular area, then you can ask questions as to why that trend's happening. And then based on the information, go out to the public, ask them, their opinion and get feedback. Because I think although we're seeing a lot of change in terms of data and, how valuable data is, we're also seeing that, how it influences the public and what services we provide is also really important. And getting public opinion when you're, bringing in maybe a service design approach. So you're trying to shift away from tech for tech's sake and move to more tech for, to enable better services. COVID has really accelerated the pace at which local government has had to adapt and become more digital. And I think it's quite encouraging that while there's momentum there, that we continue to try and drive it further into the organization.
A certain amount of cultural change would be driven by, in terms of the libraries, would be driven by the movement from traditional library services into online and digital library services, which creates a whole new environment. That in itself, which people were naturally had an inclination to be able to track because they were kind of trained librarians. I think the culture and the whole way of doing business has changed, and we've had to adapt accordingly. But it hasn't changed in a strategic way. It's almost, oddly enough, the digital landscape has formed organically. So now we're in a position where we have to catch up with that and put our stamp on it in a way that we understand it, and we can at every point look at the data and have conversations about that data. Particularly the interesting thing, I think, is that while we're using all these new systems, it's not necessarily the systems themselves are the be-all and end-all. They're not the things that are going to solve all our problems. What they're doing is presenting us with the information and allowing us to have an informed conversation. So my experience particularly in library management systems, again, is it's not the library management system to solve all problems. It's there to help us as a tool, and it's only the actual communication that's going to improve any given organization.
When you can turn around a pilot like this in 6 months, it's a really positive sign. I mean, part of the Smart Cities program is to try and encourage other departments to be innovative and to think about doing different things, not just with data, but with the solutions that they provide and how they provide their services. So if you can find a really good story to tell, and you can find a department that can support that can stand behind, I suppose, a pilot like this and say, this really improved our service or helped to improve the way we do things. That gives you, I suppose, it's encouraging for other departments then to try new things as well.
Our experience with Capventis has been very good. We had a very clear set of goals from the outset. We worked very collaboratively in the sense that we had all the partners in one place, or at least a Teams call, or a number of Teams calls. We had people from Smart Dublin. We had a number of library staff who were all involved in stats collection together with Capventis, and we thrashed through what we were trying to do. So we worked out a schedule of work. The schedule of work was clear. We had weekly updates on the status. When we ran through a number of integration issues. We persisted collectively, and we got those done. So we met all our challenges, and we brought our pilot project to a significant place, which doesn't cover everything. But I would say it's strong basis and a firm footing for any future development that we may endeavour with. Capventis did a number of training sessions with the library staff and Smart Dublin staff. So we worked through the interfaces and how we create graphs. We also worked through the back end in terms of the architecture and how we can turn the data into information that was readily available to Qlik and can be manipulated in Qlik. So we've learned a lot. Some of it has been overwhelming. We could potentially be doing more with it. Certainly, long term, I would ideally like to see, if we were to develop this project, having workshops with our own teams so that we could regularly kind of keep the interface evolving.
The process was really smooth. Capventis did an initial workshop. From that, then they developed a scope of work, and we were able to decide based on the budget that we had what elements were the most important to focus on first. And then the rollout, I think, was all in all probably about 6 months in duration. So it was really fast to deploy. And during that time, the libraries team, as well as the Smart City team, availed of training to be able to use the platform and to then try and upskill ourselves so that we could use the platform in a different way. So I suppose Paul had a very targeted idea when it came to the pilot, where from my point of view, I thought that there was a number of other services across the local authorities that would be able to use a dashboard like this and gain real insight from the information. It's really important for any company that decides to engage with a local authority to understand that the pace isn't always as fast as it is in private industry. Capventis, they knew that coming into the project. They'd experienced it before. They'd worked with other public sector organizations. And I think that it really does stand because even that knowledge, if you don't have that, it can be a barrier to projects, and it can cause frustration for the stakeholders involved when things don't move maybe as quickly as you'd like them to. So I think, it was definitely a real benefit. And as Paul said about the training, I think, Capventis were used to doing in-person training. So we have to remember that, our training sessions happened literally at the start of COVID. So they had to pivot quite quickly and, put all the training and make it available online. And even though it was, their first time to do it online, it was, it was really good. It didn't prevent us from, I think, learning what we were supposed to learn either.
It should, I suppose, Nicola, it should be pointed out that the staff that we dealt with were very patient, friendly, clear, articulate, and the materials that we got were clear. We worked through them. So, this was all very new for us in a lot of ways, and a lot of us had some SQL knowledge, not extensive, but we were learning. Although we're used to, when we're working with IT, we're used to learning on the back foot. But it was an enjoyable experience. It gave us a good flavor of what's possible.
Yeah, and I think the real world examples are really useful because, for me anyway, I like to be able to apply what I learn. So when you have real world examples to use as part of the training, I think that really helps, where you can apply it then to your own organization afterwards.
Ultimately, the potential is endless. Things like stock placement, resource selection, staff resourcing help us to ensure equality and equity of service for our communities, and allows us to specifically target help for communities that need it. And that is speaking as a librarian with an idealistic outlook.
We'd had such a good experience with the Qlik Sense product that when I saw it being used by another city, I was like, I know what that product is, because the dashboard's so clear and so clean and just so easy to understand. I think for me, that's what it's about, bringing all the different data sources together and then being able to have one view. And the fact that it's interactive as well, I think really helps if you're trying to show other people some of the stats that are available on the dashboard.
A library is ultimately about sharing, and it's about managing that model of sharing. So having all the data sets integrated in one place, which we're not quite there yet, but it would be ideally where we'd like to go, allows us to build from the ground up a data source specific to us, and to allow us to mold that as time goes on, as we understand our service and how our service is changing over time. It's a work in progress. It certainly focused the mind towards where we need to be going. There's been a joy in the simple making a connection between two systems.
And the joy in between the departments. Because a lot of the time we don't work together. So, as a large organization, I think we have 520 services, 5,000 members of staff. We don't always get the chance to see what other departments are doing. So I think even being able to collaborate with the library section has been, a real benefit to us in smart cities.
Well, as I said earlier about the importance of communication around systems. So having that collaborative approach and working with Nicola and her team, having the library staff involved there, not just my particular department, and working with Capventis, allowed us to share knowledge and rethink how we do our business, and gave us possibilities.
You can actually show that it can make an impact or make a difference to either the staff that are working in an organization, or to the public. I think that's where, it really inspires me to do more and to try and keep pushing, I suppose, innovation and encouraging other departments to take it up.
The joy in it for me, again, is making the connections between systems and making the connection between people, and having those conversations and being able to be part of a movement that is ultimately, I would expect, help us do our business. So as it stands, I mean, the library service is a very large patchwork of systems and people, and including the public. And it's gathering all those disparate elements up and being able to communicate between all those various different stakeholders in order to provide a service that the public, our public and the communities are proud of. And that's ultimately the joy in what we do.
I think it's great to see real-world examples such as those we've just seen from Dublin City Council, Smart Dublin and Libraries Ireland. I'm Mike Hawkes and I'm the CTO here at Capventis, and I'd like to talk about how we use data, how we make the most of it and learn from it. Technology has changed at an unprecedented rate. Data has become a key ingredient in modern business, but we have to understand how we gain insight from it. It's a huge topic, and we could drop into the depths of technology, databases, networks, but I think actually there's a higher level discussion to be had here, and that revolves around customer experience, understanding how people interact with computers, technology, and business. We have several viewpoints to consider, and to help me, I'd like to invite two distinguished guests. They can come and join me to discuss how to understand this ever-changing landscape. With a strong background in the history of intelligence and analytics, I'm joined by Mark Lockwood, who will help drive the conversation and stop me and our CEO and founder John Glennan from going too far off topic. Welcome both. Mark, I'd like to give you the floor.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you, John, for inviting me to put some questions to you today. So I've given this a bit of thought and thought how best to try and get this such a broad area started. So as an analyst, I like to take the broad view and the long view. So for as long as we've been selling computers, we've been selling methodologies. Okay, so if we go back to the 80s and 90s, we think about terms like data-driven and decision support systems. The 80s and 90s give way to the 2000s, and we move into business intelligence and data mining. It's quite an interesting transition at that point, because we started off with let's collect the data and get something in the system, and then by the 2000s we've got too much data in the system. We're now trying to get something out of it again, and then come 2008, financial crash, business intelligence disappears, and data science begins and becomes a new kid on the block and skyrockets in terms of popularity, not necessarily efficacy, but certainly popularity. And now we're here, it's the start of the 2020s. Okay, so now the latest term that's being bandied around is insight driven. So I'm really curious about insight driven. And I just wonder if you could maybe talk to me about, okay, does insight driven have a meaning for you guys? Is it just, commercially expedient use of nouns from the rest of the sector, or is there something deeper there that you can tell us about?
Well, thanks very much, Mark, and a good question to start us go off with. I think my take on it is, first of all, a connection between data and business and data and people. And sometimes I think we even struggle with that as a starting point. Is data some sort of nebulous thing over on the side, whereas in fact I think when we see data as being representing the world we live in and the business we're doing and the interactions and the communications, then there's an instant connection. So I think then we're kind of saying, okay, data is data. It's not very valuable when it's turned into information. We've been saying this for years. It gives us more value. And then this fantastic term insight is the kind of nirvana of data. It's where it gives us, the most value. I think what we would say today is that the value of getting insight is maybe 20%, as opposed to the value of doing something with it. I think that's where the real value is. Value comes from action. So when we talk about data driven, I would define that as using insight to inform us about what's going on, and then as a result of that, to cause us or to trigger us to do something. And maybe that's what we mean by data driven. The data isn't driving us, the insight is driving us, but the insight itself is actually coming from ourselves. So it's not coming from somewhere else, it's telling us what other people want us to know, and therefore helping us to drive and act to create some value. So I think that's my take on it today, and I think the world is full of that today, more sophisticated.
Yeah, I think from the technology perspective as well, insight is now becoming one of the key phrases for all of the analytics technologies. What we're trying to do is process an ever-increasing amount of data. We're seeing operational data, we're seeing our experience data, we're seeing a huge amount of data coming at us, more than we've ever seen in the past. And as part of that, we're trying to wrestle with these technologies to find out what it is that the data is actually telling us. So what are we finding out from the data? What are we able to find out from the data? There are new ways of investigating and delving into the data to actually make sense of all of this stuff that we have in front of us. So it's no longer just a graph or it's a pie chart, it's actually real usable information. And at this point, we're able to say that it's not just a feeling that we've got that this particular part of the supply chain isn't working particularly well. We can evidence that, we can measure it, and we can show it. And that is the big difference, I think, in getting insight from your data. And I think that's where insight now is coming from. I think we've got to be very careful, though, not to jump to conclusions with insight. It's very easy to look at a particular set of data and say, Okay, that means that, when actually it means something different. So we have to be very careful with it, and we have to understand it. So there's a lot of thought that goes into providing the systems and the dashboards and everything else that goes with the technical representation of data.
Sure. I mean, I can see a lot of what John and yourself are saying, Mike. I'm curious, though, a lot of what you've both said, I think it's kind of applied since the onset. You could say it's been there with us for decades. Is there anything especially different from right now? Is there anything right now that we weren't looking at 5 years ago? Is there new challenges or something is Insight addressing that? Is it something to do with the web or tech or anything? Is there anything different about right now?
Oh, I think there is. First of all, you're totally right, Mark. We're always reinventing ourselves. And at this stage, we are reinventing ourselves. This knowledge, this terminology, it goes way back in time. Right back to Second World War, let's say, where people really needed intelligence and needed it on a global scale in order to understand what was going on and make tactical, strategic decisions. No difference today. I do think, though, that what's changed is, as Mike said, the technology is putting an incredible level of new power in our hands. So we're able to do things at scale which we couldn't do before. That's one thing I think we're evidencing. I think the other thing is to do with, again, something Mike alluded to, is what data and how is it being delivered to us, where and when. We talk about acting on information at the right time in the right place. That means it's real time. It's in the operational environment. It's not something that's an afterthought or something we look at the end of the month. It's instant. So I think that's a real difference, again, enabled by the technology. And then the power we put in our own hands as users of this information has changed immensely. It's no longer a piece of paper, telling us something that somebody else has decided is what we should know. But rather it's giving us the tools to explore the data, to move around it, to see the big picture and then drill down to the detail. So all of these things is real empowerment. But going back to your starter there, Mark, yes, we've been saying this for years. We have changed the terminology, but the underlying principles are the same.
I think for me, the biggest thing that's changed, I'm going to bring that straight back to technology here and say it's mobile computing. I think we've seen a massive change in the landscape. 10 years ago, mobile internet really wasn't particularly strong. You look at it now, I'm able to do things in the palm of my hand that I could never consider doing 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's just changed so much. We're seeing tablets, we're seeing the likes of Starlink now pushing out thousands of satellites to make sure that we're connected anywhere in the world at any time. And I think that connectivity and that ability to gather information from millions and millions of people around the world in real time. I now have a mobile device which is not only leaking my position, but it's leaking what I'm interested in. It's sharing that information with third parties. It's making my entire life open to people that know how to investigate that data. And I think that gives people unprecedented levels of access, not only to me as an individual, but also to classes of individuals. We're able now to get much better information about how people react to situations, how people respond to events, what are people interested in. And this has moved a long way from the early days of having these individual pixels on web pages, which were trying to track your movements across the web. Now we're into something which is tracking you in real time. And it's able not just to track you, but it's tracking your relationship with everybody else. And now we're seeing that the introduction of the likes of graph databases, where I'm able to connect the fact that I'm talking right now to you two via a network, I'm able to connect all of that in near enough real time, and to then start putting together, well, these guys are actually working together on something, or they're working on a particular concept together. And that kind of information has transformed intelligence. And I think it's also transformed the way that business can use data. I
think I just add to that, Mike, is not just the nature of how we're working with this insight, but what we're actually measuring is changing as well because of what you said. You talk about connecting with people. So now we're getting information directly from people, as opposed to trying to interpret their behavior through, what they do in a very mechanical way. We're actually, connecting ourselves to information sources and insight sources that we didn't do before. So I think that's another dimension, all of which needs to be translated into something of value or something that really does make sense, or and something that actually is not looking at data just for the sake of looking at data, but looking at data for a real purpose.
There's also the part here with social media where quite often we're getting people's aspirational view. So what I mean by that is that quite often you'll post something on Instagram or Facebook which is perhaps better than the real world experience that's right in front of you at the moment, because you've got your peers and you're trying to impress those within your own peer group, or you're trying to project something about your lifestyle to that peer group. So quite often we're getting the aspirations of people as much as we're able to measure the reality as well from that same device.
I mean, what's interesting for me from what you've both said is you've kind of made an argument, John, that almost the analysis of data is becoming more democratized and therefore more social, because it's now no longer necessarily the remit of a few specialist staff. Potentially the analysis of data is now open to all, or at least certainly a much wider base than it was previously. I think that's definitely got some benefits. I think there's some potential pitfalls there as well, especially with different types of data. I want to go back a little bit to what something, I think Mike may have said it, or you may have said it, John, forgive me, I've forgotten. You mentioned, I think, operational data and experience data. Can you just kind of flesh that out a little bit? I'm just curious what you mean by operational data and experience data.
Well, okay, but even before I get into that, just one point you made there, Mark, about the democratization. One of our clients, a year or two ago, when I asked the question, who is on your team, they said everybody. And I thought that was pretty cool, actually. That everybody in the organization has an idea, has a say, has an opinion, can add value, and that it isn't just, those important people in the boardroom or in the management team. So, but going back, which might lead into the answer to your question, we talk about the experience economy today. We think we're living in an experience economy. And in a sense, that's defined by the fact that people are at the front of it. The customer, the employee, the customer, the consumer are at the front line of this. And therefore, if we want data from the consumer, or understanding what makes the consumer tick, or the finger on the pulse, let's engage with them. Let's talk to them. Let's ask them. And we term that experience data, or X data, the views of people from people about what's happened, but also about the future, about predicting what they think would happen if conditions were the way they define. So X data is a kind of a newer thing in the world. It comes from the old world of market research. And now that is quantitatively real. Okay, we can engage with literally thousands of people to get their opinion, and that's what companies are doing. Operational data is our definition of all the other data. Okay. The value chain of the business, what's going on. Maybe we could define it as the connection between us and systems. And systems are those mechanical things again, which are telling us what's going on in some perspectives. Okay, we can use both types of data to establish what's going on or has happened. We can also use both types of data to predict the future, or indeed we can use both types of data to influence the future behavior. And we are seeing that, how you present data to a person in an X data or experience data world, maybe combined with some operational data, can seriously direct or drive the behavior or the thinking of that person. We see a lot of that for good and for bad in the world. We need to recognize both.
Yeah, and I think there's an area here as well where we're starting to see a migration into machine learning and artificial intelligence. And actually that starts really muddying the water between the experience and the operational data here, because we're now trying to get emotional states from measuring people's expressions and from measuring eye movements and these sorts of things. So we start to get into an area where we can actually ask somebody, but we can also measure them, what their physical experience is through the use of operational data at that point. So we can actually stack the two side by side here. So it isn't necessarily just one or the other. Quite often it's an amalgamation of both. And I think you need both of those to be able to derive proper insight, to be able to take action from anything that's coming out of that data as well.
Let me just turn my camera off. Okay, so let me just think this through for a second. Okay, so you've got X data, which is experiences of essentially sources outside the organization, and you've got operational data, which is the bread and butter stuff that we're collecting. So I think we've just mentioned that we've democratized analysis, and we're creating all sorts of software tools to make sure that it's open to anybody. So okay, so we've potentially exponentially increased the amount of data we can collect through the various means that you've just discussed, Mike, and we've potentially exponentially increased the amount of analysis that can be done, following on from your point, John. So okay, so that to me presents going to be a real challenge in how you're going to turn that the O data and the X data into something insightful, because you've now not only you've massively increased the amount of data, you've now also massively increased the scope and the capability for analysis. I guess we're almost at, if we go back at my earlier example of, okay, we started off with data collection, and then 20 years later we're into data mining territory, as in the pile's too big already. Potentially now, especially we're talking about machine learning and AI and things like that, are we getting into realms of potentially automating the interpretation of that information, and how we're going to get insight from that?
And I would add to your question, how does timing come into it? So we have a huge volume of data, a sophistication in its analysis, and we want it now. Mm-hmm. And we want it now through, as Mike said earlier on our mobile phone, or whatever device we're using in whatever environment. So again, that comes back to technology power, as well as maybe the old-fashioned word methodology. Being able to map this out in a way which is organized, structured, controlled, without killing the innovation, and without forcing ourselves through a blinkered view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you also, I'm going to bring that back to technology again. I mean, that's my area after all. I'm going to bring this back into the availability of significant computing resources here, and the changing nature of the way that we store and retrieve data. So if we look now, I have at my fingertips the ability to call up hundreds of servers, should I need to, anywhere in the world at the drop of a hat. And I can do that off my mobile phone if I choose to. So I have the ability here to be able to say, I now have significant computational resource. I have significant data capabilities. How do I link these things together? And again, I come back to the likes of the graph databases and the connectivity between data sets. And I quite often come across questions about whether or not we want to move data or whether we want to keep data in place. And part of the argument here is that we don't want to make copies of particularly operational data, because the second we've made a copy of it, it's already stale. And the last thing that we want to be doing is working on old copies of data. And we see this quite often when we first go into companies and we see loads of Excel spreadsheets. And these are all stale copies of data that they've collected from other places. So it's really important to be able to bring that back from the real source and to come back with a clean master source, master data set, if you will, for everything that you're dealing with. But we're dealing with this on a massive scale now. So again, sometimes it makes sense to aggregate part of that through the technology stack and to be able to aggregate that information and that data in a way that allows you to extract it, but without having to go back to literally the single bit of data that was being recorded 3 weeks ago. Now, again, we're starting now to see things like the trackers on cars and the Internet of Things and all of these sort of devices now being able to intelligently drive things like maps. So I can now look at a map and say, I'm not going to take that route because that road's blocked, or there's congestion on it and it's too slow right now. And the maps themselves are capable of rerouting you. This kind of technology and having it in the palm of your hand is quite something. And again, the computational power in a mobile device now, I can go around and I can edit video, I can record things, and I can literally have loads of streams of things coming at me concurrently off a mobile device. Part of the problem now is how do we make sense of all of that, and how do we make all of that data understandable, and how do we present that out to people in a way that they can search through it and discover what is important. And it's that discovery part, I think, that that is really important here, as much as the insight itself.
I think the challenge we have, and again, we're seeing this, and this is maybe part of the thing that's very different today to in the past, is that there is this explosion in potential and in sophistication. But none of us as human beings like complexity. We want things to be very, very clearly put to us. We want to be able to see what's happening without having to figure it out. So I prefer a red and a green. Green is good, red is bad. Or I prefer a smiley face is good sentiment, versus a frowny face, which is sad sentiment, or maybe an angry face, which is something very different again. And what we're trying to do is analyze data. Maybe it's text data written in an email or in a service request, or it's video data, or it's tone of voice data, whatever it is. And the tools are very, very sophisticatedly processing that data to give us literally a smiley face or a frowny face. And then I think we need to be able to drill down in the detail to unpeel that sophistication as suits us. But combining this thing of simplicity with sophistication, I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, and I think as well there's also the challenge of not relying too much on machine learning. Machine learning has to be taught. It has to train itself, or we have to train it, and therefore it's very dependent on the information or the data that it's fed. So examples of that may well be that I love this restaurant, but the food's too salty. Now, is that a positive or a negative sentiment that we're recording against that restaurant? Does that mean I'm going to come back here in the future or not? So we have to be very careful here. If we're going to teach machines, we have to be able to teach them context. And at the moment, I think we're still a little way away from that, but it's coming slowly but surely. And again, we have to look at all of the machine learning systems and the interpretation of data and make sure that, again, I come back to what we're seeing is actually what we think we're seeing.
Yeah, I think I'd like to jump in there just by saying, because any analysts watching this are kind of probably screaming at me to ask this question. Because as an intelligence analyst, you're generally in one of two situations. You're either you're overwhelmed and there's too much data, and you have to come up with some sort of method and practice to kind of hone in on the key bits of data that you need to make your inferences and to move on. That's situation one. Or situation two is you have very little data. You've been posed a question and there's practically nothing to help you. But the two main actions that arise from that is okay, can you try and break down these complex areas into something manageable or malleable, like your point, John? You're saying, I don't want to hear it that the picture's complicated. I want almost a binary in an ideal world, yes or no. And I get that. And I guess the second task is that we give analysts, they specifically have the job of parsing lots of different sources of lots of different types to put that picture together. Now, going back to your point about democratization of analysis, it's interesting for me because if you look at the role of the analysts, especially intelligence analysts, generally speaking, you've got a transition where it went from we didn't have anybody doing it as a full-time job, and then kind of OSS CIA brought in this notion of, okay, no, we're going to have this thing called we're going to have this function called intelligence analysis, which will bring in material from lots of sources, was pretty much like a departmental functional thing. And then it eventually became a profession in its own right. And there's now methods for a human being individual to bring a lot of material in to look at a hypothesis and try and test it and present it to some sort of policymaker. And definitions vary from reducing uncertainty to all sorts of different things. As you're both speaking to me, so we've agreed that there's going to be an exponential increase in data, potentially an exponential increase in analysis, but also an exponential increase in people who are doing analysis who aren't actually trained to do analysis. You've now unlocked the door, have now got the ability to kind of throw this data around and come up to their own interpretations. So I guess moving forward from a planning and a policy point of view, okay, if you're running your organization, previously your analysts did your analyzing, for better or for ill. Are we now saying that in the future we should be thinking about making analysis everybody's problem? And if we do, how do we manage that transition? Because there's a bit of me that thinks there's always going to be a need for somebody to kind of go into that go into the place where nobody else wants to go, break down that complexity, and really get to the heart of something. Because I'm kind of got a visual in my mind of that kind of DIKW pyramid. We've got data, information, knowledge, wisdom. Okay, so we've automated the collection of data, we've automated the transformation of data into information, and now we're talking about the information into knowledge now, or the information into insight. And especially building on what Mike said about automation of that process. If you sometimes I don't really like the term AI. It's kind of like it's more like automated interpretation, really. That worries me a little bit. So yeah, just some thoughts about how an analyst in 5 years, 10 years time, or from the C-suite down, are you going to have a single analytical function, or is it something that's going to be spread out?
Well, again, you're hitting some very key points here, which we've learned from over the years. How many times have we heard that there's a disconnect between the guys writing the computer systems and the people who are going to use them? How many times do we say the analyst produces great analytics, but in isolation to the business person who's going to use them? And I go back to value. Another person I was speaking to a number of years ago said a very interesting thing to me. He said, everybody knows there's value there. The problem is, for a lot of us, we're not sure where it is and what it looks like. We know it's there, the hunt for value. So I think what you're asking is there's a hybrid here. We need analysts to build things. So every organization needs a core of expertise that knows how to put these things together. Maybe we call that the data science team, maybe we call it the business intelligence team, or just the IT department. The people who work the technology. So I think you'll always need that level of inner core expert, if you like. But then you need to connect, or we need to connect that expertise to everybody in the business, literally everybody, and they need to input the value statements, what really matters to them, and what do they really need to know, and what do they really need to do, or what do they want their customer to know and to do, or what does their customer want us to know and to do? These sorts of questions. And the normal people among us understand those questions. We have an innate understanding of the environment we're working in. So we need to connect those master analysts, or that analytical function, with that business, that business perspective, and in a way also get rid of any wasted effort, or looking at things which don't really matter, and be able to get at the right answer. So I'm not sure if I answered your question. I think everybody's involved, but from different perspectives, and hopefully the tools we use are usable, and that we empower ourselves with the tools to go as far as possible, in a self-service way, without having to knock on the door of that person who supports us.
Mm-hmm. In the world of Big Brother, I'd actually say that you measure the people that are looking at the data that you've just provided them with, if that's the right way of saying it, so that you can then say, okay, so what is of interest to them? And then you can provide more of the same. So you should actually be watching the people that are potentially watching you in order to understand what they need, and you end up with this cycle. But as I say, that's a very big brother way of thinking about it. I think as well that data has a time element to it in most cases as well. So it has a particular value at a particular instance in time across its sort of journey through the business. And I think that it's important that there's a real method behind understanding and capturing the processes and the technologies and the various ways of representing this data, and also the technologies that are feeding into that. So you understand the landscape. I think that who's going to be looking at that data in the future, that's coming down to a process of distillation, and who's actually going to be managing and collecting that, again, is going to come through this whole series of stratas of people and devices and various sensors monitoring what you're doing, pulling that together, looking at what you're looking at. So again, if you look at search engine optimization and all these sorts of technologies came about by measuring what people were looking for and measuring where they landed up. And if you could get the right key phrases, same thing with things like hashtag on social media, if you can get the right key phrases and the right key words, your content will be found. And the problem now is that there's so much of this stuff. How do you raise your head above the noise? How do you actually get people to see that you're there and that what you're saying is the right content? Some of the search engines will simply say the most connections to a given news item will say that news item is correct, when it might not be. It might just be at that particular point there is a trend that is pointing something at that. There are bots that are sending you in that. So we're now seeing the manipulation of this data, and we're seeing that it's actually very easy to corrupt and manipulate the data if you're not actually on top of what's really happening. And so it's very important here that we look at this from a security context and from a whole environment context. What is it that we are looking at? Has it been possible for somebody else to come in and corrupt that? I've seen some really good experiments, online experiments for machine learning, where they're trying to come against the Turing models and say, okay, is it really a computer you're talking to? And with one of them, it took no longer than 15 minutes for that to become the most foul-mouthed thing you'd ever heard in your world. And that's because it's human nature to try and play with these things and find out whether you can break it. And it's the old Boaty McBoatface votes that come into play here as well, saying, you let humans actually define some of this stuff, you're going to get problems along the way. So I think that in answer to your question there, we have to look at value of data at any given time as much as we look at what we're getting out of it at a particular level.
Good mechanics don't necessarily make good drivers, and vice versa. They are related fields, but they are different. And I kind of see the same with data in a way. You kind of I see technology and IT personnel as data mechanics. And I kind of see analysts, and in my field, intelligence analysis, you kind of have data interpreters, if you like. And the organization has said to that interpreter, please interrogate this and tell me what I need to know, because I for whatever reason, I can't do it. I think those two, that separation is important. But I also think that the IT provision for both of those functions is important. Especially if you're not making a third tier where we have, okay, we've got the data mechanics, we've got the data interpreters, but we've now got everyone else on top of that. And especially if there's so much more data now and everybody can play about with stuff, it just, to me, really nails the point home that we need to think about this explicitly and try and have a good understanding of what are the questions we are asking, how are we answering them, are we actually explicitly declaring and measuring what our hypotheses are and how we're testing them and things like that, because we can't do it all. I mean, when you talk about the experience economy, John, I think there's almost there's an interpretation economy out there also. People are expected to interpret the world beyond their eyes and ears and make judgments. It doesn't matter if you're in the C-suite or if you're an analyst or whoever on IT, it doesn't matter. We all make a mental model about the world, and we all have to use our imagination to get there. To me, as long as the tech is helping you do that and perhaps correcting for your flaws, that's a good thing. But I echo your concerns, Mike, about automation. if we start automating too much and blurring the lines between data mechanics and data interpretation, you get that kind of black box thinking. And the system. I read a survey today, I think, that's saying that a number of CEOs can't explain half of the decisions that some of the AIs are coming out within their own companies. That's an interesting place to be.
I think we're hitting the end of our time together, and perhaps it might be just worth all of us having a minute on what you think should be your closing statement for this part of the talk. So, John, perhaps you'd like to go first. Well, 1 minute.
I think it is back to connecting value with action and action with insight, and then insight is where the data comes from. The insight keep going back to the data from a value-driven agenda, and then bring it back. So the data now is refined. It's meaningful. It's put together in a way which is as fit for purpose as we can make it, and then bring it back to give that insight. Enable the action, do the action, and hopefully the business will have some value.
Okay, thank you. And Mark.
Okay, it's a tough call, but I'll do my best. So I think, and I'll beg your patience with this one, but for me, I think the 20th century has been about, we've gone from a transition of having practically no information about the world. Information's kind of drip fed in. If you imagine what it would have been like in the 1920s, 30s, or 40s, you're getting your data from pen and paper, radio, friends and family. Look, the information flow was far, far less, but you used your imagination to kind of gap fill, and that built a belief system about the world. We're leaving that world into a system now where everybody is overloaded completely. And I know information overload has been long spoke about and long mentioned, but not only have we now been overloaded by data, potentially we're getting into a world where we're overloaded by analysis. And so I think what's going to be crucial is how we marshal information. And I picked that word specifically. I'm not saying we should absolutely marshal data, but I think it's marshalling the information and being aware of how we do it as human beings. Because as in all lines of human endeavor, people are the problem. So we need to try and think about how can we sort that out? How can we develop tools and develop practices to use information in an appropriate context? Because I think that in the old days, we got it wrong because we had too much imagination. I worry that in moving forward, we're going to have too little, and we're just going to be like rabbits in the headlights, kind of just dazzled by all sorts of data viz and machine learning stuff and everything else. And that's what concerns me the most. So just a commitment to making sense of it.
Okay, thank you. So my take on all of this then is that we're seeing huge amounts of data hitting us from every direction. We're now moving into a relatively new paradigm where we're collecting experience data by asking people and being able to ask them at the point of the time that they're actually using and consuming data. So, how was your experience today? What do you think of our service? Would you recommend us to friends? All this sort of feedback that's coming back in. And we're doing this through the use of huge networks, massively capable systems, huge data centers now that are available at the click of a switch, and with what used to be supercomputing capacity available in the palms of our hands. And I think that as a result, we're going to see a migration from the world of people sat on a desktop relying on teams of analysts to do things, to having machine learning and to be having lots and lots of ways of interpreting and understanding that information and being provided with tools to help make that job easier. But I think the human is still very, very much needed in that landscape, because the machine won't always get it right. So that's my take on it. So I'm going to take a short break, or we're going to take a short break now. And afterwards, I'd hope you join us for a very interesting workshop around real-time data integration and software as a service. So thank you. Thanks, Mark and John.
Thank you.
Hi, and welcome to the Cloud Data and Analytics Tour 2021. My name's Lee Kennedy, and I'm going to be taking you through an introduction to QlikSense Enterprise SaaS. This is a walkthrough of some of the key features of QlikSense Enterprise SaaS. I'll be covering a number of key themes here. We'll look at the Cloud Hub, which is the central point for QlikSense Enterprise SaaS. We'll look at Spaces, which is how you organize content in QlikSense Enterprise SaaS. We'll look at how data files and connections are managed in SaaS. We'll look at how you can organize your content with collections and favorites. And finally, we'll look at the Insights features of QlikSense Enterprise SaaS. This video is recorded from the point of view of a student running through a SaaS workshop. This is based on the workshop we ran at our Qlik World online conference this year, and I'll be assuming the role of a student from now on in the video. Okay, we'll start by opening our emails. You will have received, after you registered for the workshop, an email such as this with an invite and the URL of the tenant. So I'm going to open that URL in a new window. If you haven't already, you'll be redirected to the login page. Log into your tenant with the email that you registered for. You're now presented with the welcome screen. We can see a number of areas in the welcome screen. Up the top, we have the menu bar. As we see the Home, Explore and Collections menu. We can see the Launcher menu here. This shows other areas of QlikSense Enterprise SaaS we can go to. Next to that, we have our User Profile menu, where we can see our settings. We have the Welcome panel here, which contains a number of useful things to help us learn about SaaS. We can customize our home area here. And finally, down the bottom, we have Connect and Learn. This is where we can find information on what's happening in the product, as well as training material. Let's now have a look at a demo app. If we look in the Welcome panel, you'll see here it says Explore the Demo. If we click here, what's happening is a demo app is going to be created in our tenant for us to be able to explore. This will take a few moments to import the app and create it. Once that completes, the app will be opened and we'll be able to have a look at the app. So this is a sample app that we can play around with. We're not going to focus too much on apps in this workshop, but feel free to take your time to look around the app now. When you've finished, to return to the hub, click on the Qlik logo up here and that will open the hub again. Now we're going to have a look at the Connect and Learn function. In the bottom right hand corner, click on the Q with the number next to it. We can see in here a number of features. We can see what's new in the product, and it'll tell us about things that have been released in QlikSense. We can see information on events and webinars that we can attend to learn more about Qlik and QlikSense. And we can explore more demos. We're not going to do that now, but if you're interested in your own time, you might want to look through some of these demos. And we can access help and training material in here. Now let's take a look at customizing the hub. Click on the Customize Your Home button below the Welcome tab. There are three tabs here: Collections, which we'll cover later, Generated, and Resources. For now, click on the Resources tab. we can see there's a training resource. To add this to our hub environment, click the plus sign. Now click Done. Scroll down, you can now see we've got a training tab with access directly in the hub to training material. Feel free to further customize your hub as you desire. We will use this feature more later. Now we're going to have a look at spaces. There are three types of spaces in Qlik Sense Enterprise SaaS. Personal spaces are your own area where you can develop your content. Shared spaces are similar to a personal space but allow you to collaboratively develop with other people and are quite useful for companies developing in teams. And finally, we have managed spaces. These are governed spaces and do not allow changes to applications except for the reloading of data. Managed applications can be published from either a personal or a shared space. Now, to see spaces, we start by clicking the Explore menu. By default, we see all spaces, which is this menu here. If we click the drop down, we can see what the spaces we have access to. In my case, apart from my personal space, I've been given access to the link space and the workshop managed space. We'll use the content in these spaces throughout the workshop. I can also create my own space. If I click the Add Space button, I'm going to call my space Qlik Student Space because that is my username. It's a good idea to use a name that is unique to you because there's a lot of people doing this workshop and it will be useful to be able to find your space easier if the name is unique to you. Optionally add a description here, I'm not going to do that. Create our space and we're automatically put in that space. As part of the workshop setup materials you will have received, there were instructions to download content for the workshop. If you haven't already done this, you might want to go back to the start of the document to the prerequisite system and do that. I've done this earlier, so I'll be able to continue straight away here. So I'm going to add an app to my student space. Click on the green plus button up the top and I'm going to choose Upload App. You can either drag and drop or browse. I'm going to browse. So I place this in my Downloads folder. And the app I'm going to load is the SaaS Workshop app. You can optionally put a tag here if you want on the app. So I'm just going to say Workshop. That tag will then appear and be able to be used inside the hub and other functions. For example, you can filter by tag here. Okay, so we now have an app in our space. By default, only people that are able to see your space are the administrators of your tenant and the people you grant access to. To manage access to your space, click on the gear icon to the right of your initials and choose Members. So up here, we click the icon and choose Members. You can see currently the only person who has access is myself, who's the owner. I click Add Members and I can search for various people. Now, there are a number of people here in this workshop. It's recommended that you don't give access to people you don't know. If there are colleagues you have, you're welcome to give access to them. But otherwise, we've got this dummy user created so you can safely set up permissions without worrying about anyone. There is actually no one that logs in with this user, so it's safe to add permissions to this user. So I'm going to give dummy user view access to my space. We now see a list of all the members of the space, and if a user is here, such as dummy user, we can optionally change their access directly from here. we could give them edit permissions, for example, in this space, so they could then create apps in this space and work on apps with me. It is possible to change the owner of a space, however, this is an administrative function which isn't covered in this workshop. Now we're going to look at publishing applications to a managed space. Let's go back to our shared space by clicking the back menu and then choosing our space. We just see, as we did before, we have the one workshop we imported, our application. What we're going to do is, so we can publish to a managed space, we're going to make a copy of this application. So click on the three dots in the bottom corner of the app and choose duplicate. After a moment, this creates a copy of the app for us. So now we're going to rename that duplicated app to make it easier to find after we publish it. Again, click the three dot menu and click edit. Change the name to include your user ID. So I'm going to call mine Qlik Students App. You can see it's got the workshop tag that I put there earlier that was brought across when I copied it. I want to take this tag off because I don't want it on my copy. Click Save. Now we want to publish this to the managed space. Again, click the three dots and choose Publish from the menu. Publish menu will give us a list of spaces we're allowed to publish to. In this case, we only have access to one managed space, so it's the only thing that shows up. But if we had access to other ones, we would see a list of all of them. Choose the workshop managed space. Leave the app name as it was. You could optionally change it when you publish if you wish to, but we're not going to do that now. You could also change the description and add a new tag. I'm going to add a tag called Published. Now I click the Publish button and my app will be published to the managed space. Note the app is still in this shared space. It hasn't moved. It is just now available in the managed space. So if I change spaces to that workshop managed space, I can see that my app is here, as well as another student's app, because they've published here. That's why I said it's important to name it, because it's not easy to tell the difference apart from name. We're all working off the same sample app. By the time you do this workshop, there may be a lot of people doing this, so it might actually be difficult to find your app in the list. An easy way to do this is look at this drop down that says Owned by Anyone. Click on that and select Owned by You. You now only will see the apps that you own, which in this case is only one app from me. This concludes our section on spaces. We're now going to have a look at data, files and connections. Let's switch back to our shared space. Now, one thing we haven't looked at yet is the various sections of our space. You can see here we see all types. We can also filter by apps, data and links. If we want to get to the data sources, we click on the gear icon here next to the names of people that have access. And we can click data sources. Now we don't have any data sources available right now, so we need to add some. Click the Add File button here. Browse to where you downloaded your workshop files. In there you can see we have 3 Excel files. So I'm going to select all 3 of those files and upload them into my SaaS tenant. We can now see these files available in our tenant. If you see next to them there's a 3-dot menu. This gives us the option to duplicate, move or delete a file. We're not going to do that right now. Now let's create a data connection. scroll down further and click the Add Connection button. We want to create a REST connection, so we're going to scroll down till we find the REST icon, which is here. Enter the URL which you'll find in your workshop materials. Now in this case we don't actually need to set any other parameters really. This is got everything we need, so we can just scroll down to the bottom, click Test Connection, and it works. Now you can either create to just create a connection or create and analyze, which will start building an app directly off it. For now, I'm going to click Just Create. You can see our connection is here now. So we're going to click the back button to go back to our space. And from here, we're going to click Add New and create a new analytics app. I'm going to call my app My New App and just click Create. This will create a new app and open it straight away. Once your app is open, click on the script editor. This will open our editor to come to our app. Now our app is basically empty at the moment. It just has some standard default settings for things like currency and those things. What we're going to do is add some data to our app. On the right hand side you'll see the data connections. First let's click on the icon in the data file section. I'm going to choose the cars file. Now QlikSense automatically analyzes a file and works out there's a table in there. I'm happy with this, so I'm just going to click Insert Script. So I now have a script inserted which will get that cars data into my app. Now I'm going to add some more data from our REST connection. In the REST section, move to where it says Select Data. Now, you won't see the data immediately. It's understood that it's a JSON file, which is what the data coming from is, but we have to tell it where to go. Now, it gives us a list of options, so select Route on the left-hand side here. It now has been able to analyze that root section of the JSON document and has found a table. So we have the data we want. We're happy with this now, so I'll just click Insert Script. Okay. We now have two different data sources in our app. Click the Load Data button up the top. It'll take a few moments to read the data from the two sources and load it into the app. You can see it's pulled data from both of our sources and it says it's finished successfully. So we can click Close. Next, find the line that says libconnect2. You can see this lists our space name. Click student space and then the connection name. What we wish to do is remove the space name to make this what is called a relative connection. If we have a space name in here, regardless of where our app resides, it will always pull the data from the space named. However, now we've changed this to a relative connection, it will look for a connection of that name in the current space. This is useful when publishing applications, for example from a shared to a managed space, which may have a different version of the data connection in each space. It's a way applications can move through the development lifecycle without having to have the code changed. Let's check that this works. Click Load Data again. It will now try and load our data as before, but using a relative connection. This will make no real difference, but will validate that our script is working. And it is loaded, so we can say close. Now the focus of this workshop isn't really to develop apps, so we're going to leave this app here. It doesn't really do anything, but we've illustrated the use of data connections and data files. Click on the Qlik logo up the top to return to the hub. Now we want to move that app to another space and see what happens. Click the three dots in the bottom corner of the app and choose Move. From the drop-down, choose your personal space. You'll get a warning that the app will no longer be available in Qlik Student Space. That's fine, and it's what we want. You can also choose whether to navigate to that space by default or not, which we want to do. So let's click Move. Let's open our app again. Choose Data Load Editor up the top. So we're back in the Data Load Editor section. Now you'll see two things if we remember. We changed the libconnect line to use a relative space. We did not change the line for our data file though. So let's see what happens when we try to load the data. As you can see, the first part worked. We were able to load data from our file because it used an absolute path to the space. However, we got an error loading our jokes. The reason is the connection to the jokes is not available in this space. That's to be expected. And normally the way you would do this would be create another connection in this space. Let's close this down. Now we want to create another jokes connection. We can do that straight in the data load editor. So click Create New Connection. Scroll down until we find the REST connection again. Enter the URL. And then test the connection again. Connection works, so let's click Create. Now, the connection is a bit different here. We need to change the name to match what's in this space. In the workshop material, I called these jokes, which is probably a bit easier, but I didn't do that here. So in the name, let me save that. And now click Load again. And it's worked. So what's happened here is we're pulling the data from the student shared space for the cars file, but we're pulling it from the local space for the REST connection. Okay, close the app now. We're not going to look at these connections anymore. And one thing we want to look at finally in terms of data is the data catalog functionality that's been added to Qlik Sense Enterprise SaaS. In your space, move back to your Qlik student space where the data files are and click on the Data tab. We can see our spaces here we can see our data here. Let's click on the cars file we looked at before. Choose the option Profile Data. The Data Catalog has analysed our data and it tells us some useful information about it. For example, it's giving us some sample values. We know we've got Fords, Chevrolets and Dodges. It's looking at min and max values for relevant columns and tells us how many distinct values there are. This is quite useful in understanding the data when you're building an app to try and determine, for example, what are keys and what fields are nullable, that sort of thing. Close this down. Now, if we wanted to, we could also create an app directly from the data in this file, just from here, without actually doing anything else. This will generate an app for us. We're not going to do this right now, but this would be the same as if we created an empty app and added this file in. This concludes our section on working with data connections. Now we're going to look at collections and favorites. Let's just return to the home area of the hub. At the top of the hub, we see the collections menu. Click that now. We see in the collections area, we see favorites. Now all users have a favorites section, that's automatic, but you can create other collections of your own. If we look at the generated section, these collections are created automatically for us by QlikSense. One will show all our apps, our data, etc. You can see that these ones that are green have already been set as collections that are turned on the home screen. If you don't want one of them, you can turn it off, or also you can turn them on. Let's start by turning on the recently created collection by clicking on the little home icon. That will now show on our home screen. Now click Home again to return to the home screen in the hub. We now see the recently created section has been shown on the home screen. Let's have another look at favorites now. Let's go back to the collection section. You can see we have a favorite section, but there are no items in it. When we want to have favorites, we add those items into the favorites collection. Click the Explore menu and choose the drop down to pick the linked space. Here we've created two links for you, one to Qlik Community and one to Qlik Help. These are useful links. So click on the little Add to Collection button and we can see we're given the option to add to favorites. So I'll click the plus icon and then Done. I'm going to do the same with Help. Click plus, and you can either click the plus icon here or you can just click favorites here. It does the same thing. And click Done. Now, if I go back to my collections menu, you can see I've got items in my favorites. So if I click on my favorites, I can see those two links. Now let's find the app we added to the managed space. Remember, if you have trouble finding it, you can click Owned by You. I'm going to add this to the favorites as well. And if I go back to collections now, I can see they're showing in my favorites. But not everything you want will be in your favorites. You may want to create a specific collection. So let's do that now. Click on the Create Collection button. I'm going to call my collection based on my name. So the name for my account is Qlik Student. Oops. Okay, and now I'll create my connection. So now I have a second collection, but there's nothing in it. Let's go back to the Explore menu and choose our personal space. I've got 2 items in here. I'm going to click My New App, and now I have the option of adding it also to the favourites, but also to the Qlik Student Connection. Note you can add them both at the same time if you wish to. I'm also going to add the beginner's tutorial to the Qlik Student Collection, and also to the favourites. If I go back to my collections menu now, you can see that I've got my student collection has 2 apps I added. My favourites has now also got the extra app I added. If I go back to the home page, and scroll down, you can see I have my favourites available, but I don't have my collection. As we did earlier, you can use Customize Your Home if you want to add that in. I'm not going to do that now, but you could do that if you want to see that collection on your home screen. This concludes the exercises on collections. Now we're going to look at sharing and monitoring insights. Firstly, we're going to look at adding charts into Hub. If there's a key visualization we want to see, we can add it to the Hub so we see it as soon as we open the Hub without even having to open the app. We'll see an up-to-date version of the app when we do this, when it's reloaded. Let's go to your personal space. So click the Explore menu, drop down for Personal, and open the Beginner's Tutorial app. On the Beginning with Basics app, which is the default sheet you see when you open the app, we see a number of charts. Sales per region is a useful chart for people interested in sale, so we're going to add that to the Hub. From the 3 dots menu, click on that and click Monitor in Hub. We then get a preview, and we can choose options if we want, such as to store the view state. We're not going to do that. We can add tags. I'm not going to do that either, and I'm just going to say Monitor. Now, it gives us an option to open that. If you're quick enough, if you take too long, that will disappear. Let's click Open. And we can now see that chart is available in the Hub. We don't have to open the app to see that chart now. Now, if we hover over it, we can view chart to see more information, or view it in the app. I'm just going to click View Chart here. It's loading the chart. This is loading live data. It's not an image. And it's telling you a bit about the app. When it was generated, for example. It tells you the app and the space it's in. When you're finished looking at this, click the little X button to close it. Now we're going to look at data alerting. Click the Apps button or the All Types button to go back. We want to open the Beginner's Tutorial again. So either scroll down and find it here, or go to the personal space. I'm going to do it from here. We're going to open the Beginning with a Basic sheet again. And again, we're going to stick to the sales per region chart. Click the 3 dots on the sales per region chart and click Create Alert. Give it a title. I'm going to call it Top Sales Regions. And next we need to click Add Measure to add some data. It automatically tells us what's involved in the chart we were looking at, so I'm going to click Sales because that's what we want. Now click Refine Your Data. Choose the drop-down and the Show by Dimension. Again, it shows us the dimensions used in that chart, so we're going to pick Region because we want the same sort of data as the chart. For selections, we don't want any selections in the app. As it happens, we haven't made any, but we want to be specific, so we're going to say no selections. Scroll down and it gives you a preview of the data that it sees. So it's going to show us the values here, not the chart, which is what we want. Next, then click Next. So our goal is to capture the countries with the most sales relative to other countries. We don't want to see all the data all the time. We only want to see the most important data. So for Measure or Dimension, click the drop down and click Sales. For the operator, we want greater than, which is selected by default. For Compare With, we want to click the drop down and select Current Set. For the aggregation section, we want to select percentile, and for percentile, enter the value 80. So in other words, we want to see sales for regions that are greater than 80% of the sales overall. That is, we're looking at the top 20% of sales. If we scroll down, we'll now see a preview of that, and we can see only 2 countries match that, UK and USA. Click Next. Notification frequency lets us know so how often we're sent this alert. Always will not mean it runs all the time. It means it will run every time the app's reloaded. So in other words, every time there's a potential for the data to change. If the app's loaded more often than that, for example, say your app's loaded every half an hour or 15 minutes, you could choose to only have that alert once an hour or once a day or once a week or once a month. It really depends on what your goal is. If it's not something that changes through the month, you don't want to receive this alert every day when the data's, if it's based, say, on a monthly total. So for us, the app isn't being reloaded in our environment anyway, so it doesn't matter. We'll leave it as always. You can optionally share this alert with others. We're not going to do that. So click Create Now. So the alert is created now. We want to return to the hub. From the hub, click on your initials in the top right hand corner. You'll see an alerts menu. Click on that. You can see the alert we created. You'll note it says it has not been evaluated and has not been triggered. What we can do is click the 3-dot menu and say Evaluate Now. That will cause Qlik Sense to run through this app and run this alert, and if relevant, we'll fire the alert. Now we see, if we look at the top, that there's a new alert. If we click there, we can see the top sales alert we created has triggered. So if we click on that, it pulls it up and shows us the detail of what's happened. And we can see the values there. This concludes looking at insights in Qlik Sense Enterprise SaaS. It also concludes this workshop run through. I hope you've enjoyed this walkthrough of Qlik Sense Enterprise SaaS. I hope you're enjoying the Cloud Data and Analytics Tour. My name's Lee Kennedy. It's been a pleasure to take you through this today. I look forward to seeing you again soon.